You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, good to be back with you once more. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. And I'm your host, Steve Adams on Mighty Blue. You've probably noticed how our shows keep getting longer, often over an hour and a half, and today is no exception. We have a terrific conversation with a guy who thru-hiked the AT back in 2007. His name is Spencer McKay, or Warpzilla, and he had a very specific reason to go on his thru-hike, along with a couple of buddies. I'm not going to preempt it, but I'm sure you're going to be drawn into Spencer's poignant tale, and I'm very sure you'll understand his emotions at the top of Katahdin. Spencer will be on shortly. After Spencer, we catch up with three more of our Mighty Blue class of 23, and the good news is they're all still heading north. We're catching up today with Mr. Dale, Bluebird and Garmin, otherwise known as Dale Shotkoski, Jessica Lang-Wright and Joanne Flagg. They're going to be on, in that order, after Spencer. Then George Stefanos is continuing his day hikes in Vermont. Unfortunately, he's yet to get going before noon. But just before I introduce you to Spencer, I'm afraid I've recently heard some terrible news from a member of the Mighty Blue family and somebody I met on my 2014 thru-hike, who I got quite close to on my return from the trail. Some of you may recall one of our early guests on the podcast, Gabe Burkhart, otherwise known variously as Hermes or Sketch. Gabe and I communicated regularly after our interview, and I was a bit surprised when he just stopped responding. I knew he had faced demons from his military service. He talked to me a lot about that, but he seemed happy with life in Romania with his wife. It turns out that Gabe passed away on a day hike in Romania in 2020. He was, I think, just about 50. Somebody I met at Trail Days reached out and let me know. So sorry, Gabe. Now, let's meet Spencer McKay. Today's guest is Spencer McKay, otherwise known as, strange name, Warpzilla. Hey Spencer, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Well, I'm good, thanks. And you don't look like a Warpzilla to me, not that I've ever actually seen one. So where did you get that?
So it started as just a fun nickname in Boy Scouts when we would just give each other nicknames. And then there was one day on the trail, it was in Tennessee, and we were going up a really steep section of trail. There were no switchbacks or anything, and it was hot. My mouth was open, and there was a cloud of gnats kind of flying around me, and one flew in my mouth, and I kind of reacted as you would.
Yeah, that sound comes across really well in audio, by the way.
I bet. And then kind of shook it off, kept slugging up the hill, and it happened, 10 seconds later, and it just it ticked me off, to say the least. So I picked up a rock that was right below my feet, threw it against a tree, and then it bounced off the tree and kind of tumbled back to my hiking partner, Bandana Ben's feet. And we both just stopped and looked at each other, and he was like, "Yep, Warpzilla it is." So
funny. And you actually did the AT, I believe it was 16 years ago in 2007. We're going to get
2007.
We're going to get to why you did it in a moment. But first, tell us about your backpacking and hiking background prior to hitting the trail for a thru-hike.
Prior to the thru-hike, as I said, I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. Grew up in Boy Scouts. We had an awesome scout troop, Troop 215, in northern Raleigh. And every summer, right when school got out, our scoutmaster, Mr. Charville, he would take, it was up to 20 scouts some years, and we'd all go for 5 days on the Appalachian Trail.
Wow, that's some responsibility, by the way, for a guy to take all you kids out on the trail.
Yeah, we were blessed with some really great leaders, not just Mr. Charville, Mr. Mazer, Hassaker, a bunch of others. and, their kids were all my age as well for the most part. And yeah, everybody just kind of fell in love with the trail. Mr. Charville, he's still knocking off sections to this day.
Oh, cool. Funny enough, I was going to ask you about him. He's one of my questions, actually, because you kindly sent me a copy of your book, and I haven't been able to read it all at the moment, but I've jumped in and out and so on. One of the things was about Mr. Charville, your scout leader. He got up hours early just to comb his hair and shave in a nearby creek. So tell us more about this superhuman person.
Just one of those guys, especially as a young man, when he walked into the room, just demanded a presence, demanded respect, just controlled the room. And he was serious, but, he loved the outdoors. He loved scouting, and he loved sharing that with all of us. And so him taking us out on the Appalachian Trail is really where the seed was planted, if you will, for me wanting to do a thru hike someday.
And that's some legacy for a man to get to his, in my case, dotage, and look back and think, who have I impacted? He's obviously impacted, I'm sure, a lot of people, clearly you. But at this stage, when you were on the AT, the concept of the thru hike at that stage hadn't really hit you, had it? Is that correct?
Not entirely. It was in 2005. I had just graduated high school. I was about to attend my freshman year at UNC Charlotte. Yeah. And Mr. Charville took us down that year for the annual trip to Springer Mountain. In years past, it had been sections in, southern North Carolina up to kind of Grayson Highlands, Mount Rogers area. So this is the first time we had been down to Georgia. The trip was usually about 5 days, 50 miles. And this
That's
time...
enough. That's enough even now.
Right?
Yeah, blimey.
Yep. With scouts from all ages, really, from 14 up to 18, 19. And some scouts would even come back, even though they had been done with the scouting portion of the scout program, which was pretty special. And me having just graduated high school, that I kind of fell into that group in 2005 when we went to Springer. And so from there, I almost did the entire portion of Georgia. A few other folks stuck around to get across to North Carolina.
Sure, yeah.
Which in my book I call out Mr. Charville for kind of greedily setting that goal because he wanted to knock off a section himself.
So he had no ulterior motive. Excellent.
That's right, but fully understandable. And then from there, I have a high school friend, Garrett Dixon, who would always go vacation in southern Maine in Freeport. So another scout in my troop was Stephen Harrington.
Sure.
And he was on the 10th anniversary trip to Springer Mountain. And once we got done with that, we started talking, hey, maybe, we've been to the beginning in southern or in Georgia.
Cool.
So we were like, hey, look, we should go check out the end in Maine at Mount Katahdin. So I had a friend, Garrett Dixon, from high school, who's also an Eagle Scout. So we're all Eagle Scouts. Yeah. And I called Garrett up. He's working up in Freeport, Maine for the summer. And I would say, hey, me and my buddy Steve, we want to come see you and hike Mount Katahdin. He's like, come on.
That's a massive ambition, though, isn't it, really, as a kid, really?
So, I was 16. Well, I was 18 and Steve was 19. And, I was about to be a freshman in college, Steve, a sophomore in college. And we book our plane tickets and fly up there. And Garrett had always told me, Mount Katahdin's unlike anything you've ever hiked. We might not even make it up. Like, it's crazy. And we're like, yeah, okay. But no, we fly up to Maine and meet up with Garrett. We drive up to Baxter State Park, and that first view of Katahdin you get off the highway. We
Awesome.
pulled over and took pictures. We were like,
yeah, sure,
blown away. And the hike was just fantastic. It was a beautiful day. And on our way up, we met a guy from James Madison University. He was finishing his thru-hike.
right.
And this was mid-July, so he must have started fairly early. And so we beat him up to the summit. He was hiking with his 9-year-old little brother.
Yeah, that'll slow you down.
Yeah, right. So we were up on the summit, and we just watched him finish his thru hike, and lean on the plaque up there, and we were sold. We were like, okay, we're doing this.
Wow.
We're doing this someday.
You decided to do it. So you mentioned you'd been to Springer, the Grayson Highlands, and hiked in North Carolina. So a lot of the more southern area of the trail, and then you did Katahdin. What was
Right.
it about backpacking that spoke to you, I suppose? I know it was the scouts and that camaraderie and so on, but that whole idea of a north to south adventure, what was it that really did it for you?
Probably a big catalyst. In my freshman year of high school, my brother convinced me to go run cross country. Mm-hmm. Now, I hadn't ran more than a mile in my whole life. Wasn't necessarily an athlete build, if you will. So
I resemble that remark. Yeah.
In the book, I have a line. I wasn't the fat kid, but I did have a pair of husky-sized pants. So if that paints a picture for you,
Yeah, nice.
But I think cross country, a combination between cross country in high school, and these week-long trips on the AT in the summer with the scout troop, and every month in scouts we had a camping trip.
Sure.
So we went somewhere every single, one weekend every month.
Sure.
So it was just a combination of those two. And then when we hiked Springer and then hiked Katahdin, we just knew we had to connect the dots.
Yeah, I know you feel. And you've already mentioned Stephen, obviously, and Garrett, but I know that Stephen Harrington is a pretty important person in your life. Tell us about him as a guy.
He was just the most fun-loving, adventurous, maybe a little troublemaker at times, but, we can all be a little
Doesn't make him a bad
mischievous.
person at all. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Just loved life to the fullest, and that was Steve.
Well, I'm not sure how much you want to go into this, but briefly, could you tell us what happened, Stephen?
Yeah, so in November of 2005, so just, a few months after we had gotten back from hiking Katahdin together, I get a phone call from my brother late one night, and he tells me Steve is dead. And that was one of the hardest nights of my life,
I'm sure.
for sure.
Yeah.
So, I was in architecture studio at the time doing, pulling an all-nighter as the program allows. And I ran to my girlfriend's dorm at the time and just tried to, through tears and all that, tried to explain to her what had happened, because she knew Steve as well. And then all the phone calls started coming in.
Sure.
And one of those biggest phone calls was from Steve's best friend, Ben Bacardi, who was in our
bandana?
scout.
Is that bandana?
That's Bandana Ben.
Bandana
Yeah.
Ben. Okay. So he passed, and we're not going to really talk about too much about it because it's a personal thing. How did that cement your purpose, though, in hiking the AT? Because you wanted to do it with him, so that purpose then changed, didn't it?
It did. It went from doing it with him to in honor of, basically.
Okay.
And when someone passes away that's close to you at a young age, the frailty of life just kind of hits you.
Oh, yeah.
And not necessarily something you've thought about before. It was when you're young, grandparents pass away, that sort of thing.
They're the ones you
family
expect to
members.
go, yeah. You expect those to go. This is a shock, I'm sure, on an almost cataclysmic level for you, especially when it's your best friend. I know what a best friend meant when I was a kid. And, and it's a terrible, it must have been a terrible moment for you. So the three Eagle Scouts who set out to do the hike, it was going to be you, Stephen, and Garrett, I presume. Who actually set out and did it?
So it was Bandana Ben, who was Steve's best friend growing up and was in our scout troop as well.
Right.
And then Garrett Dixon, who's one of my best friends from high school. We're all Eagle Scouts, and myself, of course. So we're all Eagle Scouts. Steve was an Eagle Scout. And, once we heard the news, we said, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't even have to, meddle over
Bandana Ben wrote a really nice foreword to your book, which I thought was very touching, and I had a look at that today as well. So how did you all prepare? Once you decided you were going to do it, this was in November 2005 that he died.
Correct.
How did you prepare?
So we thought if we started in spring of 2006, that might be a little aggressive,
Yeah.
which, for better or worse. But so we said, okay, we're gonna take till May of 2007 when we all finish our spring semesters in college, and that'll give us time to plan everything out and make sure we got our I's dotted and our T's crossed. So
what were you hang on? What were you giving yourself then? If you were going to go after spring semester, which is when? When does that finish?
So we kind of all were staggered a little bit.
Right.
Garrett was at Cornell at the time, so he got out last, and he got out May 17th, I believe.
Right. And when was your next semester going to start, or did you just skip that?
So my fall semester started first, which was I'd have to double check the dates, but I think it was August 10th.
Oh, right. So you didn't have much time. So what were your dates then? Tell us what your actual start and finish date were then.
Yeah. So from when Garrett got out and could come down south to me having to be back on August 10th, there was 90 days available.
Wow.
Yeah. So we started on May 21st and finished August 23rd.
Wow, you were not hanging about, were you? But, you're experienced people. But you also told me, which was quite interesting, unbeknown to him, Andrew Skirka provided you with some great info as well. Tell us about that.
He did. So Andrew thru-hiked in 2005. So we would just drool over his gear list and his daily itinerary, and how did he end up with his pack that light kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we weren't quite as extreme as far as ultralight's concerned, but we definitely started light and finished even lighter.
Wow.
So
good.
yeah.
Because the ultralight movement as such in many ways started around that time, didn't it? Probably a little bit earlier. What was your pack weight then with food and water? Do you know?
It was right around 30 pounds.
Mine was 42 when I did it first time, which is pathetic. So you headed out. What were those early days like then? By the way, you went from Springer to Maine, I presume, yeah. So what were those early days like?
Maine.
What were those early days like?
It was like, wish I hadn't gone to that party a few, But, so we took that extra year to plan and train and all that. And, we didn't end up doing much of anything other than normal college life.
Yeah.
So
perfect.
It was, right. It worked out.
Yeah.
It was tough. I will say to start the trail, it was me, my dad, Steve Harrington's parents, Tim and Julie,
Nice.
Ben, and Garrett. And I was the only one that had been to Springer before. So we get to the parking lot on Springer, and I'm like, yep, this way, guys. And so we hike about 20, 25 minutes, and like, yeah, I think we should have been to to the southern terminus by now. And so we say, you know what? I screwed up, guys. We got to go back. Springer is the other way. So, journey of 2,175 miles, which was the length of the trail at the time, started off in the wrong direction.
Do you know what? It's a good humbling thing to happen, because the AT humbles you every single day, doesn't it? So every day. So get used to it, man. That was okay. And there's a certain rhythm that you need to attain on a thru-hike. You were quite experienced backpackers, or certainly you were. Did you find out that you worked out the rhythm pretty quickly?
Yeah, it didn't take long to get into the groove. I will say for Ben and myself, Garrett ended up getting hurt on a descent down into the NOC, Nantahala Outdoor Center.
Yeah, that's tough.
And that was a really tough moment in the trip, because at this point, we had all been hiking. We'd all been, getting our trail legs. Sure. and making do. So that was day 9 or day 7.
The NOC in a week. Oh my God.
Yeah. So we were able to start out, in the teens, and then, we did a 24-mile day on day 5 or day 6.
Cool.
And then,
yeah. So you got into it pretty quickly. You worked out how to make it done. So he got injured on the way down, or was he considering quitting?
He got injured. He was struggling with shin splints up to that point, which he was managing. But it was basically a high ankle sprain. Right. And we slept on it that night in the bunkhouse at NOC, and he wasn't feeling any better when we woke up. So we hitched a ride down into Bryson City, went to urgent care, and the doctor's like, "Well, you have overuse syndrome."
No shit.
Yeah, no kidding. So basically, Garrett made the call to leave the trail. He was going to get back to Raleigh, rest up, heal up, then start training to meet back up with us in Damascus.
Right.
So,
and did that work out? Did he come back then?
He did come back in Damascus, which, at that point, Ben and I, we were cruising. You were cruising. We were putting up some big numbers already, and Garrett hung around a few days with us, and then his dad, who's also huge into scouting, wonderful guy, Bill Dixon, he ended up meeting up with Garrett and picked Garrett up and just kind of took him just north of Parisburg, just so he could keep hiking, but wasn't necessarily going to overdo it or injure himself further. And so he kind of leapfrogged us, and we kept going in the effort to try to catch him. Sure.
And with the fact that this was done to honor your friend, was it a joyful hike or was it a somber hike?
It was much like the trail, a roller coaster, if you will. So we did carry Steve's ashes the entire way. We sprinkled some in Springer, and then every state line we crossed, we switched to who was carrying Steve. So we had him in like just a little 4-ounce Nalgene bottle.
Sure.
And so, yeah, there were times when, especially in the southern portion, when we would come across a spot that we remember. Some spots we even had pictures at, Ben, Steve, and I all together.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was deja vu.
I think I'd feel the impact of that quite strongly because of what you were. I can see you feel like you're. It seems to me, looking at you now, you're feeling it now. It's I know it's a while. Sure. It's a while ago, but this is kind of, as you've written the book, probably fresh in your mind in many ways as well. Do you think you would have done this had it not been for Stephen? I mean, kids say they're going to do all sorts of things when they're kids, and they don't ever get to do them. Obviously, It cemented you to his death cemented the fact that you did it. Do you think you would have done it had it not been for Stephen?
I would certainly like to think so. Like the very first page of the book is me in 10th grade English class, and my teacher, Mr. Gillespie, had asked everyone to write down the top 5 things they wanted to accomplish by the time they were 25.
Good question.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We should all be so lucky to do that.
Right? Yep. So number 1 for me, even as a 10th grader, was thru-hike the AT.
Wow.
So, without doing that summer of 2005 where we hiked Springer and then Katahdin, and then without Steve passing away, to kind of be the catalyst, if you will, for making it not just a goal, but a priority.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You never know, but I think you have a feeling about a hike, and I want to ask you how it impacted you in a minute. But your Katahdin day involves some of Stephen's family, which is pretty special. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we got up to Katahdin Stream Campground on August 20th.
Mm-hmm.
Leading up to that, if I can back up a few weeks from that date, we were on our way into Rangeley, Maine.
Remember it well.
And we were at...
He's checking the book, by the way, now.
So we were at Bemis Mountain Lean-To.
Okay.
And Ben wakes up that morning, hits the privy, and I see him walking back to the lean-to, and he's just kind of holding his belly like, I don't know, man, something's going on.
You normally do.
Like,
by the way, you normally do know at that stage.
Right. I was like, you're fine,
don't worry
shake it up.
Yeah.
And we get about 20 miles down the trail, 20 minutes down the trail, and I'm like, hey, Ben, I got to tell you, I don't feel so good either. So it was a mad dash, if you will, to the highway to get to the IGA in Rangeley, Maine, to get some kind of medicine in us. And turns out we had Giardia.
Nice.
So that was 9
Charming.
days from finishing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So at that point, our finish date was pretty much blown because we stayed in Rangeley, incapacitated for 5 days.
I should laugh because I should actually, because I didn't get it. So
yeah, so we sat in Rangeley, Maine for 5 days, doing what you could imagine we were doing, and so I had to. We knew our end date was not going to be when I needed to be back at school on August 10th. So I called the dean of the College of Architecture and kind of begged, stole, and borrowed all I could from him to try to convince him I could miss the first week of class and still be okay. So he was very understanding. Dr. Ken Lamla was his name. So thank you, Ken.
bless him.
So we did the 100-mile wilderness, coming into. Well,
He's reading his book again.
Before I was just looking at the mileage sheet. So yeah, we did off of Giardia. We did 2 miles out of Rangeley, and then every day over 27 miles, just about, and then a 38-mile day and a 33-mile day to get to Katahdin Stream Campground, to meet my mom and stepdad, Mr. Harrington, Tim Harrington, Steve's dad, and Ben's mom,
Nice.
Melinda. So we all got up early the next morning and hit that trail up to Big K, And my mom, bless her heart, as we say here in the South, she wanted to hike that mountain worse than anything.
I'm sure she did.
She works up on the 8th story of her building downtown Raleigh for North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So for months, she had been taking the stairs every day and walking around the neighborhood. And but we got up about halfway up Katahdin, and it was just a little too much for her.
Sure.
So we kind of had an emotional goodbye as my mom and stepdad turned back, and then I kind of sprinted to catch up with Mr. Harrington, Ben, and his mom, just in time to reach the final summit with them, and we had kind of an emotional.
I bet you did.
Ceremony spreading the rest of Steve's ashes on top of Katahdin.
Did it surprise you, the emotion you felt? Because a lot of people do actually touch the sign and don't feel that much, but you were doing this for a specific purpose. Did you find it quite emotional?
Very, yes. It was just the culmination of so many things, Ben and I grieving together for 2,100 miles. It's not all we did. We did have a great trip.
Sure.
But it wasn't, it wasn't a slow trip. We were all business.
You were moving, man.
Yeah, we were sun up to sundown, and other than our time off with Giardia, we only took 3 other days off on the whole trip. So,
did it feel appropriately cathartic to finish? Did it not so much, closure's a strange expression. I'm not terribly sure what closure means in some cases, but did it feel to you that this was what you needed to do to move on?
Yes and no. I mean, it felt like we had honored our friend. We had kept the Harringtons. They were so supportive the entire time.
I'm sure.
From when Ben and I got to Raleigh before we hit Springer, we were at the Harringtons' house all day and night, planning the finer details of the trip. And then it was just something good, I think, for everybody to, I don't want to say keep their mind off of things, but it was just a positive.
Sure, I agree.
Instead of a negative. So yes, it felt good to finish, and it felt like, job well done and all that, but it's still a loss.
Of course. Yeah. That's never going to change. It's always going to be a loss. And you told me actually when we spoke before that I was asking you about how the hike has impacted your life since then. And you said to me that it gave you patience. Considering you were moving like a lunatic, how did it give you patience?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. Obviously, the story about Bandana Ben confirming my trail name Warpzilla doesn't sound much like patience.
No, exactly.
But I don't know what it was. It was just like when we finished, it was just this huge, it was a release. The whole thing was a release. But patience also in the fact that, on the trail, there's a lot of things you can control.
Absolutely.
And a lot of things you cannot control.
Yeah.
So
that's a lesson to learn for anybody who goes out on the trail.
Absolutely. And in day-to-day life, people want to have control over probably too much,
yes.
or they worry about things they don't need to be worrying about because they can't control it.
That's right.
So I think learning the patience to worry about yourself and, whoever's close to you, and maybe not worrying about that, deadline at work as much, or
now, your boss might not agree with you on that one, by the way.
They might not,
but you wrote about it in 2018. It was a 2007 hike, and you kindly sent me a copy. And if you don't mind me asking, why did it take so long to get it written down, or was it something you didn't want to approach?
It certainly wasn't that I did not want to approach it. It was something I wanted to do. It just turns out with a full-time job and the real world,
that old pesky thing.
you really just don't have much free time. So finally, after really saying probably in it was probably 2017, because that was 10 years, and I was like,
sure.
Oh my God. Like, I have got to write this book or I'm going to forget so much. So
had you kept a journal, by the way?
I kept a decent journal, but it was Ben was much better about it than I was. He's got a note pretty much every day, at least bullet points at the very least. But with our blog that we had going, pictures,
sure.
What I had journaled and what Ben had journaled, and then just the memories. It's just, and it was the darndest thing, because I could recall, almost every town meal that I ate, but I couldn't tell you what I ate, last week. So
that was the freedom to eat whatever you like. And by writing it, though, did it bring up old wounds, or did you? Well, I've mentioned the word cathartic before. Did you find it cathartic to get it down on paper?
Not really. I found it really enjoyable. I've actually always enjoyed writing. Mm-hmm. Certainly write more than I read. But yeah, it was twofold. It was selfishly for me to do it, so I got it down before I forgot. And then also just to share the story and maybe give people a laugh, give people some inspiration, and chase your dreams.
I noticed some amusing things when I was flicking through it this morning, so it looks like it's going to be quite a fun read. So where can people actually find your book then?
Yeah, so it's I self-published through Amazon, which is
sure.
Easy enough. Just
most of us do these days,
yeah. So that was fun trying to figure out.
Yes,
it wasn't.
That's
too
a whole
bad.
exercise, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. It's like I never thought I'd be learning about this, but yep. So it's on Amazon. Walk With You is the name of the book by Spencer Warpzilla McKay, and I'm currently recording the audiobook.
This is what he's doing in his wife's closet, by the way, just so people can't see this, but I can. He's in his wife's closet. So, funny enough, I've got a closet behind me as well, which I go into from time to time to record. But look, I appreciate you reaching out. I think it's a great story to tell, sad in many ways, but I think it's kind of happy in lots of other ways as well. And the fact that you keep that memory and you can record that memory and you can put that book out there. I'm very pleased you gave me the opportunity to interview you for the show. So thanks very much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, man. Take it easy, okay?
Yes, sir. You too.
Cheers then. Bye.
Cheers.
Can you imagine those emotions at Carnarvon? As I said, it may not be closure, but it must have seemed like Stephen was with Spencer and his buddies all the way. And I can think of a few better ways to honour somebody's memory than to go on a thru-hike in memory of that person. I've since read more of Spencer's story, and it's a good read, so I'll add a link to it in the show notes. Now, let's hear from Mr. Dale. Here he is. Hey, Dale. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm good. And you're in town today to do a few chores, I understand.
Yeah.
By the way, just to let you know, I've got bloody somebody mowing the grass outside, so we may hear that a little bit, but let's soldier on through.
Okay.
Talk to us about town chores. Nobody's actually talked to us about it yet, and that was one of the first points you said. What do you actually do when you get into a town?
Okay, well, found a place to stay. My wife's been helping me. She's my logistics person.
Nice.
So she found me a hotel.
Yeah.
And when I get here, I got in yesterday evening. So first I just wanted to shower.
Yeah. And where actually are you, by the way?
I'm in Troutville.
Okay.
Right next to Daleville.
Okay.
And then I back flush the filter, have to clean all the water bottles. I like to wipe down and wash down the sleeping pad because it gets gross. It gets, just gunk on it. So
yeah, you'll get over that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll stop doing that.
And then there's more ticks, and so my wife had sent me permethrin, so I treated my clothes this morning, for bugs and ticks, and
right.
And then I'll mail some stuff back, and then I'll eat, and then I'll eat again. Those are some of the town chores.
Of course.
For resupply.
Of course. So the ticks, when did you start noticing them more?
It's been a couple weeks ago. I wear long sleeves, long pants. Mm-hmm. And and I've been fortunate. The people I've been hiking with, they're just starting to see them more and more. And they said as we go further north, we're probably going to see more of them.
Wow.
So they are out. So you have to be mindful of it.
Yeah, good move to do the permethrin. Really, really important. And when you get into town, the towns you've been into, what do you think people's attitude is to you? Because let's face it, however much we clean up, we still look pretty ragged, don't we?
Yes, we do. But the towns that I've been in are considered kind of hiker towns. I think I was visiting with the hotel and a shuttle driver yesterday, just a little bit, and who was just dropping some other hikers off. And
sure.
They said they like hikers because it's really good for the economy. A lot of hikers spend a lot of money in these towns along the trail.
Yeah.
So they've been very welcoming. I have not run into any rude people at all in the towns that I've been to. They're welcoming. They understand.
That's nice. Now, I don't know my trail geography as much as I should do, but having done the trail twice, but I know that since we last spoke in Damascus face to face, actually, but not on the show, but we spoke face to face. You've since been obviously through the Grayson Highlands, and also you've just done obviously the Virginia Triple Crown. So first up, let's talk about Grayson Highlands.
The Grayson Highlands was interesting because it's a different terrain than what we had been in for so long.
I agree.
And it was more open area. It seemed drier, but you could see further and stuff. You could see ponies off in the distance.
Sure.
They had some of the wild cattle out there, some of the longhorns and stuff. I ran into those too. And it was some rocky hiking, but the day I was there was on a weekend. And so there were other families out there also with the ponies. So you could see kids just having fun.
Nice.
And it almost seemed like a day off, from a regular hike. It seemed like a play day to go out there and enjoy it. And so it was fun. I enjoyed that.
But, the rocky terrain is something I wasn't expecting in the Grayson Highlands. I probably should have read about it in the past, but it did surprise me how rocky it was, didn't you?
Yes. I was not expecting it to be that rocky of a hike that day. When you think of the horses out on pasture areas or something like that, but no, it's not an easy hike.
It certainly isn't. And what about the Virginia Triple Crown? Because I know you obviously that starts with Dragon's Tooth and McAfee Knob and then Tinker Cliff. So let's talk through those, because Dragon's Tooth was one of my favourite places. So tell us about that, because you've actually put in your notes that you had a bit of an issue with Dragon's Tooth.
Yeah, I had stopped the night before after that Audie Murphy memorial.
Yeah.
And I kind of self-camped, and it was a dry camp, and it was hot the day before, and I went up, I think it's Brush Mountain. I'm not sure which mountain, but I went up and I was rationing my water. Mm-hmm. Then when I went back down, I kind of got more water before going up Dragon's Tooth, but I must have been behind in my hydration. Uh-huh. And by the time I got up to Dragon's Tooth, I was really sagging. The energy level had dropped. It was hot. It was close to 90 degrees that day. Ooh. And so I made it, but it's a tough climb down too. And when I got down, I was able to get to, there's a little grocery store in a town there as you come down, and I was able to get some Gatorades in me and kind of hydrate and cut my day short because I just needed to be healthy. And that was my wake-up call to, I got to drink more. I got to watch my electrolytes. I got to be safe out there because I really felt the energy drop, and I knew I was getting dehydrated, and I did too long of a stretch with too little water.
It's a good reminder to get, though, isn't it? Even on my little 5-day hike after trail days, I I'm sure I didn't drink enough water, and yet I should know as much as anybody really about what it's like to get dehydrated. And I know that Dragon's Tooth itself is a tough climb anyway. It's not just the tooth itself, but the climb up to it seems to be endless, doesn't it?
It does. It was way longer than I expected it to be. I kept hoping it was around the corner, and it wasn't. I had to go around quite a few corners before I got there.
Plenty of full summits, yeah. And did you go up? Did you actually climb the tooth, or were you just so low energy by then?
I was low energy, and to be safe, I did not climb the tooth. And there was also a lot of day hikers and much younger people who were doing that. Yeah. And I wasn't gonna. It just wasn't for me at that time. Safety, and then also numbers of people. And so it was best for me just to get down and get to some liquid.
Yeah, but even the getting down, that holds your attention, doesn't it? That holds your attention.
And I was by myself that day, and so there were times that they have a few rungs, that you have to go down, and so I even took my pack off a couple times and would go down and then turn around and grab my pack and then put it back on again, just because I didn't want the weight to swing me, on a big step down. So I used extra caution that day and enjoyed it. I mean, it's beautiful, but again, it was just a tough hydration day for me.
So having stopped after the Audie Murphy shelter, where did you stop that night, or did you go on through McAfee Knob and Tinker Cliffs?
No, the next day I went through McAfee Knob and Tinker Cliff, and I'd recovered well, which I was really happy to see my body bounce back so well. I got the liquids in me, got some food, ate well, and so I took off for McAfee Knob, and thick fog, a little bit of drizzle. Made it all the way to the top, and I look out, and there's some, again, day hikers and everybody up there. Everyone's disappointed. Nothing to see but white.
Oh, dude.
But sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, And so anyway, I got my picture taken with a white background, but I was there.
It's important, though. It's important still to record it, but it goes to what I often say on the show: take your views when they're there, because they may not be there next time.
Exactly.
It may have been later in the day that it all burned off, and people the same day as you had a fantastic view from McAfee Knob, but you just didn't, and that's kind of the way it goes. And then I got on to one of my favourite spots, which is Tinker Cliffs. So how was that for you, or was that similarly just fog?
It had cleared slightly. So you could see down into the valley from the cliffs. Mm-hmm. You couldn't, they say if you you can see McAfee Knob from there, but it was still too thick. We couldn't see that. Right. But the cliffs themselves I like that area.
Yes.
I really did.
Yeah, fantastic.
It was stunning.
And your last point on the text, which I thought was an interesting one, though also we haven't really discussed much, although I suppose intuitively we kind of have in many ways, weather has such an impact. So what did you mean by that?
The weather, I find I used to exercise a lot in cool morning weather. Mm-hmm. And so if I can take off on a day and it's cool, even a little foggy like yesterday was for me, I work efficiently, and you don't stop as much because you have to keep moving because you're kind of cold if you stop.
Yes.
And so I tend to cover more miles. And like I said, you don't get the views, you don't get some of that, but you cover miles. But even in the fog yesterday, I came across a big bear with 3 little ones.
Ooh.
Tried to get a video of the little bear climbing down a tree. And of course, my skills are so bad, I got a video of a tree. I missed the bear.
Excellent.
I really do. I would like to get a photograph of them because I've been lucky enough to see them at a distance. I haven't had any close encounters, so that's good. But on those days too, you still see snakes, you still see the different lizards, you see different things that still grab your attention. And I'm still amazed that I'm still coming across different flowers, and I've been trying to take pictures of flowers, as many as I can, because the mountain flowers are so pretty.
Sure.
Even on a rainy day, they're pretty. And the other thing I discovered that can actually be quite beautiful is sometimes in the meadows on a dewy morning, the number of spider webs and the artistry of those webs is sometimes just artistic. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Walking through them, if you're the first one out in the morning, isn't so much fun. You clear the trail of spider webs for everybody else.
It's called silk blazing, though.
Yeah, I've done that. But no, you find those things even on the dewy, foggy, drizzly days. There's still things to see. There's still things to enjoy.
And when we met in Damascus, which was lovely, by the way, it was lovely to all sort of get together as we did in Damascus, or quite a few of us. You seem very happy and you sound very positive now. Is this still going as you'd hoped it would?
Yes. Actually, it's going, I don't want to oversell it. It's, I'm enjoying it. I'm really, there's hard days. I've had several hard days. Like
Sure.
Dehydration day was a hard day.
Sure.
Where you kind of where doubt crept in, like, oh my goodness, I got to be careful. But if I still find things to smile about every day, I'm going to keep on doing this as long as I can,
Yes.
because I'm finding new things every day. I'm meeting new people, because I had started off with some hikers, some have gone home, others have moved either behind me or moved ahead of me. But you kind of move in and out of groups and in and out of people that you meet, and you may see somebody you haven't seen in 10 days or 2 weeks, and you come across them and it just brightens your day, and so the people are great. The trail magic volunteers and people who will offer you rides and things like that. It just lifts your spirits. I mean, it's good. It's good. It's beyond my imagination.
So, but obviously last time you said you'd been named. Has that changed, or you're still Mr. Dale?
I just stuck with it. Again, so many people have called me that now. That's what it is.
There you go.
That's what it is.
Okay, man. Well, look, lovely to talk to you, and I'm so pleased you're doing well. And yes, which mile are you up to now? I think 720 or something like that. Is it 730?
730.
Wow,
730.
That's a lot of miles, isn't it?
You look at a map now, and it's starting to seem real, isn't
yes,
it?
It is. It's happening. It's happening. Okay, man. Well,
yes,
look, stay in touch, and next time we speak, probably you'll be somewhere near Harper's Ferry, or maybe soon before that. But yeah, keep going, enjoy it, and we'll catch up soon. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, man.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Dale was such a happy camper when we had dinner in Damascus, and he was clearly having a blast. It's never good news when you hear about an outbreak of ticks, and that isn't going to get any better as they head further north. By the way, I noticed while I was editing that I referred to the Audie Murphy shelter. There isn't an Audie Murphy shelter. It's the Audie Murphy Monument. It's a very poignant place, and I have strong memories of it on both my hikes. When I was a kid back in the UK, my dad and I used to love watching Audie Murphy movies on a Sunday afternoon. It's kind of our thing. Happy days. So, Dale's going well. What about Jessica Lang-Wright? She was also with us in Damascus for dinner. Let's find out how she's fared since. The sound of this conversation isn't perfect, but I've edited the heck out of it to make it sound better. Here's Jessica. Okay, we're back on with Jessica Lang-Wright. Hey, Jessica, how are you?
I'm great, Stu. How you doing?
Well, you seem so much happier than the last time we interviewed, although I have seen you since at Damascus, obviously. So tell us how it's been going.
Things have been going really well. I just passed the mile mark yesterday.
Which mark? Which mark? Which mark was that?
600.
Wow, that's something, isn't it? So where actually are you now then?
I'm at Weary Feet Hostel, which is just after that, like 609 or something like that.
Yeah, I know it. Well, it was flooded there last week. What's it like there now?
Everything's fine. It was flooded here last week. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Betty McInerney sent me a video of the stream, which was the trail. It was amazing, and the river outside came a long way up. It really did. It really burst its banks. So you got to it at a nice time. So what's been happening since Damascus?
Just hiking along, making the miles and hitting some milestones. We went up, of course, through Grayson Highlands, which was amazing.
Well, hang on.
Ponies, of course.
Hang on then. So let's talk about that, because Betty's not a big fan of the Grayson Highlands. It was too rocky for her. So how did you find it?
Well, being from New Hampshire, I'm used to rocks, so it didn't really faze me at all. I loved it.
Of course you did, yeah.
There's been a lot of people complaining about rocks around here, but, it's part of the deal.
So that's through, I'm trying to think where you are then. So you went through the Grayson Highlands. What's after that then? My geography, my remembrance of geography on the AT is terrible. So you're past the quarter way in then, aren't you, as well?
Yeah, we did stop in there, of course. I can't remember if I told you this, but years ago, Jester, her podcast, had a giveaway for one of Tina's necklaces.
Oh,
and
cool.
I happened to win it.
Oh, how nice. Nice.
Right? I had seen that necklace on its little card on my dresser. I mean, it's got to be 2 or 3 years now. And I kept thinking about putting it on and didn't. And I ended up putting it on the day I left for Amicable.
That is so cool. Well, I'm actually wearing mine right this very minute. I'm always very proud of it. It's, when you've done it or when you're doing it, it's a lovely way to record your hike and look at the miles that Virginia take up on it, isn't it?
Yes, and feel like you're making some progress as you move that little marker along there. Yeah,
that's right. I think I seem to remember that each of those little beads is 25 miles. It's something like that. Yep. And 25 miles is a long way, but it's a very short way on that necklace, isn't it?
It sure is.
So are you still with Mighty Mike? Or is it him? It is Mighty Mike, not Magic Mike, isn't it?
No, it's yes, I am.
You are, okay. And are you hiking with other people as well, or are you just pretty much hiking together?
We're just hiking together. There's some people that we've been hiking around, of course. You kind of end up at the same shelters and whatnot, but we're actually getting off trail for a couple of days because Mike has a event he has to go to. So we're going to probably lose those people. But one of them's a section hiker that's getting off. But, we've been kind of hiking around with some of the same people, but mostly just hiking together.
Sure. And with the, let's face it, terrible start that you had, the problems you had earlier on, do you feel that much more safe hiking with a partner now?
I mean, it helps for sure. I mean, I don't think we're hiking because we like hiking together, and obviously there's a safety component to it too, but of
course, yeah. Yeah, and he joined us for dinner as well that night, which was lovely to see all you guys from the class of 23, all out there, all got to Damascus, and now you're getting there now. When you think about it, when you first get to Neil Gap, you think, well, I've done 20 something miles, so I'm about 100th of the way there. You're over a quarter of the way there now, and that's quite a milestone, really. How are you feeling in terms of your prospects, or are you just looking at it day by day, seeing what the next couple of days are?
Really trying day by day. I think I'm glad there's 0 or 2 coming up because I'm ready for a little bit of a break. Passing there was something about the 600-mile mark. And I think it has to do with the fact that I have an old friend who attempted the AT many years ago and ended up getting off after 600 miles. And to be at that point now feels like a big deal. There's just something about
it. It really is. Yeah, and it really is a big deal. You should celebrate those milestones. They're important milestones. This every single 100-mile marker that goes by, I tell you, they go by remarkably fast now. I know you're living it and enjoying it and trying to make the most out of it. But each 100 miles, they're going to start going by faster. What sort of miles are you doing per day now?
I mean, the last few days, it feels like it hasn't been very much because the heat and humidity had kicked in here in Virginia, and humidity is kryptonite. Luckily, my hiking partner feels the same. So we've been kind of taking it a little bit easier, but we did 14 and 15 to get into Damascus the day before trail days. Our last 100-mile marker was only like a week and a half ago. So, we definitely feel like we're getting faster, stronger, but in a way that's hopefully not going to put us in any trouble, because we've definitely heard of plenty of people, unfortunately, having to get off for one reason or another because of injuries.
And
it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, you endured the cold before, and then you were looking forward to those warm days, and then you have the heat. And I found myself looking back to those cold days almost wistfully, thinking, "Oh, I wish it was a bit fresher today." It's I remember being up the right up the top of a hill somewhere, just for a camp or a shelter somewhere in Virginia, and I can hear this noise behind me, and it was like thump, 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 and I thought, God, it's a bear. And I turned round, and it wasn't a bear; it was my heartbeat. I could hear. It was so banging in my chest. The heat and humidity was absolutely killing me that day. Now, I went obviously hiking after trail days, and I went for 40 miles, and we saw a couple of bears. We saw 3 bears. Have you seen any more bears or any animals?
Well, I finally saw my very first bear, fortunately, at the shelter right before Damascus. We were, I forget what it's called, but we were doing that 15-mile day to get into Damascus before trail days. And unfortunately, this bear came right up to that shelter, and there were a bunch of people yelling and all of the usual things that we do. And that bear was not away. So, of course, Mike chased it and barked at it, and it finally took off. But I think I'd take off if Mike chased and barked at me as well. He's a big lad. Well, yeah. So, so I saw that, and then somewhere after Grayson Highlands, but I think we were still in the park. We were hiking along, and I hear this crash, and I look off to the side, and we keep laughing about my reactions, but I yell bear and point at it, and I saw the rump of this thing take it off, and Mike says he heard the thundering of its feet. I mean, it was a pretty good sized one, but at least it was what a bear is supposed to do, and running away from us. So that was a good thing.
It's a wonderful sight when it happens. That shelter you're talking about is Abingdon Gap Shelter, and they closed that soon after because we were coming through. So we didn't stay at Abingdon Gap because we were told about this bear activity. Yeah. Well, look, I'm delighted you're enjoying yourself still. You've got Dismal Falls to come soon, then Pearisburg, and you got Woods Hole. Are you going to stop at Woods Hole if you get a chance? Yeah,
we're planning on stopping there once we get back on. Yep.
Okay. Well, look, say hi to Neville for me. Send him my love, and you'll enjoy it there. I tell you, there's a good place to take a couple of zeros. Stay in Woods Hole for a couple of days. You'll enjoy that. But look, enjoy yourself. Stay in touch, and just send me a note when you've got a few more things to report, and we'll catch up soon, okay?
Can I tell you one more quick story?
Absolutely. Please do so.
Okay. So I can't remember the campsite, but there's a comment in far out from me. We stayed at this little campsite one night, and this whole time, I've been using a bear canister, and when my bear canister is too full of my food to put my cook pot in it, I just put the cook pot next to it when I put it in the woods. So the next morning, I wake up and my bear can is down the hill from where I put it, and my cook pot is gone.
Oh.
And there were raccoons in the area. The only thing we could assume is that a pack of raccoons took off with my cook pot, which is the weirdest thing to say, but that is what happened.
Oh, that's so cool. Let's hope it wasn't a fellow hiker who nicked your cook pot.
No, I really don't think so. But, I'm still trying to imagine these creatures that tend to walk on 4 feet, taking off with this thing. But, we scoured the hillside and we could not find it at all. So Jeez. I'm a little sad because I had this nice little blue folding spoon that was inside of it. But, of the weird things that could happen on this trail.
Yeah, but doesn't it show you, Jessica, how important it is to make sure you are careful with your stuff and you put it away as much as you can?
Yeah, I think if I'm going to have to hang my if it doesn't fit in my bear canister or something.
Okay, well, look, stay in touch. Send me a text next time you're ready to have a chat, and we'll speak soon, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.
I noticed I mentioned my lack of AT geography again. I'm afraid it's true. I couldn't tell you within about 100 miles where anything is. There are a couple of places that stand out. Damascus at 470 miles, McAfee Knob at around 710, but really I'm a bit foggy about the rest. Much like Dale, Jessica had really got back on track when we met in Damascus after that scary start. She looked confident and ready to go. And passing 600 miles is a milestone to be celebrated, like all milestones on the trail. Every 100 miles, every new state, all the iconic spots, you should revel in it all out there and enjoy those moments. She certainly seems to be. Just before we hear from our third member of the class this week, it's time to thank all of you who support our podcasts, whether by buying a t-shirt or a mug from our store, hrntradingpost.com, or by your generous donations to the show. This week, thanks as ever to our monthly donors, Jens Lipperheider, Brian Helton Jr., Lisa Rana, Woody Bass, and Natisha Webb, while Nicole Mentai and David Santi also sent generous donations. The end of the month is a little bit fraught with plenty of money going out from the coffers, yet you guys get me through it, and I really appreciate your support. If you'd like to show your appreciation of the value that we give you, then make sure that you click on one of the many donate buttons on our hikingradionetwork.com website and share the love. Cheers. Now, let's hear how Joanne Flagg's getting on, much further north on a flip-flop. Here's Joanne.
Good morning, Steve.
Hey, Joanne, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. And you just sent me a message on a Wednesday morning for tomorrow's show, which is perfect. We're gonna have a catch up with you. So where are you now?
I am just outside, just north of Bennington, Vermont.
Oh, wow. Wow, you're moving on then. How many miles what sort of mile is that now then?
575, 585.
That is not a short distance. And when did you start?
Over a quarter done, April 14th.
You're moving on. Wow, you are moving on. Good Lord. So how are you feeling? I'm
feeling good. All the things have kind of straightened out.
What things needed straightening out?
Yeah. I have an arthritic hip, which was kind of wonky in the beginning, but it got stronger and it likes being stronger. Then my other hip went a little wonky and my hip flexor got sore, and that's getting better. But I had texted you. I also had gone home for a couple of days. So I went to my chiropractor, and he just said, wow, you are doing really good. And I didn't require a lot of adjustments. So that was really fun.
How long were you actually off the trail then?
We scooted home Friday afternoon and came back Monday morning. I went home for high school graduations and celebrations.
Oh, right. So it's always a strange thing, isn't it, when you go home when you're in the middle of a hike? So how did it feel to be home? And was there any moment you thought, oh, no, I don't want to go back now?
I was really excited about going home, and I came down the road. I could see my house. I'm like, oh, there's my house. And it felt like somebody else's house.
Oh, wow.
Like the last time I was away from home for 7 months, I think I was in college, 50 years ago. So it was really different, but it felt so good, so heartwarming, and everything inside and outside looked good. And I didn't have any times when I didn't want to come back, but it was a big difference between when I left for the trail. It was just pure excitement.
Of course.
And then when I left on Monday morning, I was kind of sad.
Yeah.
I miss everything, but it doesn't take long to transition back and get back in the trail mode. So.
And in the message you sent me, you talked about going home for a couple of days. Then you said the role of 0 days. So what do 0 days mean to you? And do you take the full 0, or do you just do a Nero, go into town, do your stuff and get out again? I mean, what is a 0 for you?
Well, I took a 0 2 weeks in when it was pouring one day. And then I hadn't taken a 0 until I got to Upper Goose Pond, which was 4 weeks later.
Good Lord.
And
wow.
Yeah, and I hadn't had a lot of short days necessarily either, but I picked a good spot. I don't know if you remember me saying I'd like to do my zeros in the woods.
Right, I do remember that. Yes, I do remember that. And is that what you did? Your idea of a 0 was just to stay at Upper Goose Pond, which is a great place to stop, by the way.
I did. I stayed there 2 nights, and it was wonderful. Other than that, I have been in town like overnight in a hotel or a hostel.
Sure.
But I hadn't really felt the need to take zeros.
Right.
And then when I did, it felt good. And I'm not sure I felt like I needed the rest so much for my muscles, maybe for my brain. just like not to keep pushing.
Is that what you're doing though? Are you pushing against a deadline? I mean, how do you're doing pretty darn well, and you're gonna go up Katahdin much earlier than most people go up Katahdin, obviously because you started where you started. But are you pushing on a bit?
I was for a while, and then the week before we went home, we needed to kick back a little to not overshoot where we were getting picked up.
Oh, right.
It was just so much fun.
Right.
I did. I stopped at Goose Pond. We stopped at the Cookie Ladies and weeded blueberries for a free lunch. And
yeah, nice.
We did a lot of fun things, and it felt like, well, that's why we came out, was to have that kind of fun. And you can't do that all the time because I'd never get the trip. If I averaged 10 miles a day, it would take me 7.5 months, and that time I don't have.
Yeah. Are you time limited then? Was there a certain time you need to be off the trail?
No, but I also wanted to go south to Flag Mountain.
Oh,
so
of
I wanted
course,
to try
that's
to
right.
make
Yes.
sure I wanted to make sure I had time for that. Plus, I'm taking 2 weeks off in the middle for Iceland.
All right,
so,
of course. You are a busy woman, aren't you?
yeah, I'm very fortunate.
So the 2 weeks in Iceland, when does that actually come up?
The first 2 weeks of August.
All right, nice. I bet you're excited about that as well. Good Lord.
Yeah. The other thing about going home was my plan to lighten my pack.
Mm-hmm. And how'd that work out?
Excellent. I took out my 20-degree sleeping bag and put in a 30-degree quilt. Right. And I took out my bear vault and put in a bear bag, a few ounces bear bag versus a 2.5 pound bear vault.
Yes. And also, I bet you noticed a difference in space, haven't you, as well, in your bag?
Yes. It rides much more comfortably. It doesn't squeak incessantly in my ear.
First world problem, by the way, Joanne. But real first world problem, yes. That is. Your squeaking canister, yeah. So, and one thing that you said that I'm trying to decipher what the text means. Things you've been thinking about. So, what have you been thinking about?
Well, sometimes I know I just I love this and I love that. And I was thinking, well, but it's not all. People will say to me, oh, your Facebook posts, you put on all the good stuff, but what's it really like? And I'm kind of like that. All right. And, when you're out here on the trail, you process so much every day and you attend to so many small details every day that the past quickly becomes the past. And then you think about something and you're like, oh, when was that? And it can seem like a long time ago. So I don't dwell on the negatives and I just go with the positives on a daily basis.
Is that something you've learned on the trail or something you find yourself doing on the trail, or is that something you as a person tend to do generally?
I've learned to do that with age.
Okay. You gain grace with age.
Hopefully, right?
Yeah, you think so.
But but I guess I don't know. But the things that I've been thinking about, like the troublesome things that have stuck in my head that I've spent some time with, are like the feet problems. Like starting in Harper's Ferry is a nice place to start, but You've got Pennsylvania and your feet aren't used to the hiking yet. So those rocks. That
is always the downside for me. I mean, there are plenty of downsides for me, but that one particularly, starting where you started and hitting Pennsylvania so quickly, you could be put off quite quickly by the trail, I would think. I just totally believe that this is built as a south to north trail because you're getting ready for things as you get further north because it gets tougher and tougher and tougher and tougher. And also, after Pennsylvania, as you probably noticed, the rocks don't stop, do they?
No, but they're not the same.
Yeah,
I haven't minded them as much.
There's still plenty of them. And you say that you usually just appreciate everything, but there are those times, ...
Yes,
what's the
there are those times when my language gets a little, in my head, my language gets a little naughty.
Salty, let's say.
An example is the Palisades Parkway.
Oh gosh.
So the trail has gone over that forever, but the last year or two they closed it and they made a detour.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, most people are still running across the parkway. And I think there are probably a lot of other roads that are just as dangerous. But I decided to take the detour because I promised everybody I would be safe.
Yeah.
And if anything happened on the parkway, that wouldn't, that would be really hard. So I took the detour.
But, it's not the detour. That is, those who are going straight across the parkway are not doing the full trail. I don't care what they say. The trail is where the detour is, isn't it? So, that's where the trail is. So, get it done.
Yeah. And I said, and so that's my mileage, and I want to do all the mileage.
Absolutely.
But the water source is, if you run across the parkway, you hit a water source. No water source if you take the detour. And we were going up to West Mountain Shelter where you can see New York City.
Which is pretty cool.
And so, but that was 1.3 miles beyond the trail. Oh. So I go around, I'm going up the end of this mountain, over the rocks and over the rocks and over the rocks. And I look down and I see the same parking lot that I passed a mile and a half ago, but now I'm on the upside of it instead of the low side of it. And I'm like,
dear.
GD parking lot is right there still. And I went up and up and up. And it's a good thing it was worth it when I got there, because I was not a happy camper. And I get up on the blue trail and I'm like, there's plenty of great spots for a shelter right here. Where is it?
It's funny how we have this don't you find we have this internal dialogue with ourselves quite often, in fact, and you are actually arguing against yourself sometimes, aren't you?
Yep. Sometimes you coach yourself. Sometimes you cuss at the trail. Sometimes you argue.
And you referred to we. Who are you hiking with right now?
I've done a lot of hiking with a girl named Wrong Way, and
that's not an encouraging name. Wrong Way.
She always gets where she's going, and usually ahead of other people, so she's fine.
Cool. And do you find those times when you're hiking with somebody to be different than when you're hiking by yourself? We've talked about this a lot on trails. So I don't want to drag it up all the time, but I'm so interested in how people go from being in a tramley to not being in a tramley, and then back into being a tramley as well. Do you find it's a different hike once you're with somebody else?
Yeah, a little bit. Not, you can't talk all the time when you're hiking with somebody on the trail, and sometimes you separate a little, and sometimes you talk for a while, and it goes along good. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Trigger and I, when we hiked together in 2019, we would often hike 20 yards, 50 yards apart, so we wouldn't be talking to each other. We spend most of the day just hiking by ourselves, but together, if you know what I mean. And that seemed to work for us. So you still enjoy despite the internal dialogue, is this still a thing that is meeting your expectations or exceeding your expectations?
Meeting and exceeding. Like right now, there's not a lot of views, which is one of my things. Mm-hmm. Like I love to see the views and be up there, but the whole thing is just fascinating to me. Yeah. And finding the flowers and showing them to people that might be around is a lot of fun, and interacting with people at home through text or Facebook about it. Nice. The support and amazement at home is just incredible to me, because I think anybody can do this if they want to. Anybody can do anything that they want to, but when somebody does it and they get to watch it. And when I was home, people were really just wanted to set eyes on me, like to see that I was okay. In spite of seeing pictures on Facebook or whatever, they wanted to come to my house and set eyes on me so they could feel better and know I was okay.
And do you feel well? You say you've got slight hip problems every now and then, but do you feel physically within yourself pretty strong now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's a great feeling.
Yeah, my legs have come a long ways.
Yeah, amazing.
And my feet feel pretty good. I wore the same pair of shoes for 575 miles, which was well beyond what they should have been, but
bless you.
The mailing and everything got mixed up, so I got them when I got home. But
so you're enjoying it. You're having fun, which of course is the important bit, the most important bit. That you're actually having fun, and don't worry about the lack of views. Trust me, you're going to be inundated with views in the next couple of months or next month or so. So
Well, that's the thing, is that's what I'm working towards right now. Is getting up into the mountains.
Of
So
course.
I'm almost there.
Yes, you are. You are excited. I'm really excited for you. Okay, Joanne. Well, lovely to catch up, and we'll catch up again soon. Okay.
Yep, sounds great.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Joanne's right, you know. The trail gives you plenty of time to address what's on your mind, sometimes too much time. And that was for me. And isn't that funny? Her friends and family feel the need to set eyes on her. As she said, pretty much anyone can do this. But it's a way of life that many of our friends and family can't comprehend, and the need to lay your eyes on someone is probably important for their peace of mind, because they can't imagine how she can be okay. Well, as you heard, she is, and pushing on just before the big ones. We'll catch up with her next in New Hampshire, no doubt. Finally, and somewhat coincidentally, George Stefanos is also in Vermont, even though it was about 40 years ago. This week, he's struggling to get going in the morning. I totally identify with that. I'll see you next week. Wednesday the 24th of August, 1983, mile 1627.2. A 12:45 start. Oh well. I had 4 major mountains to climb. I would need to average 2.5 miles per hour, rest stops included, in order to complete this section by dark. I keep managing to make day hiking a greater challenge than backpacking. Perhaps I'm becoming addicted to the pressure. My first climb featured the largest elevation gain of the day. The trail ascended about 1,400 feet in 2.5 miles to the summit of Bromley Mountain. The climb was well graded except for a bit of steep scramble near the top, and I hiked it in about an hour. That took care of the first big climb and still kept me on the pace I would need to maintain all day. It was an encouraging start. To be specific, I didn't quite need to average 2.5 miles per hour today. I had a 20-minute cushion with which to play, so naturally I blew 15 minutes of that cushion atop Bromley's 3,260-foot summit. The views were perhaps the most spectacular I'd seen on the entire hike up until that point. Thanks to a mass of dry, crystal-clear air entrenched over New England today, I gazed out upon an expanse of country covering hundreds of square miles, from the Adirondack Mountains in New York in the west to the White Mountains of New Hampshire to the east. Bromley's summit featured a wooden observation deck, part of the extensive ski development on the mountain, which gave 360-degree views. I talked with several people who had paid to take the chairlift from the valley below to the platform. A couple of them had a problem comprehending why I would take the whole way up. Now that you mention it, I could have driven from Georgia to Maine with a lot less expenditure of time and effort. Damn, why didn't I think of that? A short, sharp drop into a col was followed by a brief, stiff climb up to the north summit of Bromley and a nice view south across the ridge crest to the main summit. The Appalachian Trail descended very gradually along the north ridge through a beautiful forest of balsam fir and red spruce. I stopped for a quick scan of my guidebook, checking out what the trail ahead held in store for me. I saw, for the first time on this adventure, a word which chills the blood of New England backpackers. I was descending into a notch. Mad Tom Notch. In New Hampshire's White Mountains, these deep, glacially carved valleys are known for endless, steep 2,000-foot ascents and descents. A mile climb up out of one of those valleys can take as much out of a person as 10 miles of normal hiking. I steeled myself for the worst. Happily, this notch was nothing like its cousins in the neighbouring state. The descent was rather moderate. The climb back out was steep for most of the distance, but not excessively so. The AT climbed about 1,000 feet and a bit over a mile from the floor of Mad Tom Notch to the summit of Stars Peak, the second of my 4 major summits today. The top of Stars Peak was 3,394 feet above sea level, about 270 feet higher than Bromley's. The views were almost as nice, almost another 360-degree panorama, though not quite as unobstructed. I had to spend a few minutes taking it all in. On almost any other day, this mountain would have been the main highlight of the hike. It was difficult to tear myself away after just 5 minutes, but it was 3:45 and I still had 11 more miles to cover. At this time of year, it is almost completely dark at 8 o'clock. I'll be back someday. The Appalachian Trail continued along a somewhat muddy ridge crest sprinkled liberally with small bogs. The lush spruce fir forests testified to a damp climate similar in some respects to the southern Appalachians, but this woodland had a completely different feel. Harsher temperatures and cold north winds here create a starker, more barren-looking rainforest than those down south. There was less undergrowth, no vines and creepers, and none of that riotous, concentrated crush of growth so characteristic of the jungle-like forests of North Carolina and Tennessee. The trees here were slightly more dispersed. They faced a more desperate battle to grow and survive than their southern cousins. I could see signs of that war all around me. A fir tree was anchored to a huge boulder, its naked roots clinging to that rock in a desperate embrace which, to me, seemed to symbolise the struggle for life here. New England topsoil, scoured by the glaciers, is very thin, and the roots of trees must soon grow out rather than down into the earth, dooming those trees which apparently were winning the battle by growing the tallest. They hang on grimly, fighting and clawing for life, but eventually a nor'easter with their name on it roars across the ridge and the giant tree becomes just another mossy old blowdown on the forest floor. There are no ancients along these ridge crests. I crossed over several knobs along the crest to Peru Peak. This summit, at 3429 feet, was the highest I crossed today, but the peak was heavily wooded. A side trail led off a few yards from the AT to a viewpoint which was barely a peephole. Nevertheless, I enjoyed this mountain also. When I was a kid, coniferous forests always seemed to hold a special magic for me, and that feeling never completely went away. Besides, I was in a wonderful mood today. I descended along a rocky trail to a low, boggy area on the ridge, flying over long stretches of log walkways. When they were well made, and it's not raining, walking on them is like walking on a sidewalk. I've had many chances to practice this technique this summer. The trail followed the eastern shore of Griffith Lake for a while. It was another lovely spot, one of the many large mountain lakes I have passed in New England. I stopped for a couple of minutes on the shore to listen to the rippling of the waters and to savour the views of the surrounding mountains before I went on. The final summit of the day was 2,850-foot Baker Peak, to which the Appalachian Trail ascended after leaving the lake. This was the lowest summit of the day, so I was not expecting much. The end of the climb scaled straight up some open rock ledges. A broad expanse of the mountains and valleys to the west, as well as a large chunk of the Green Mountain chain to the north and south, were visible. Up ahead were Pico and Killington, the two highest mountains on the Appalachian Trail in Vermont. Because Baker Peak lacked the commercial development of Bromley, this became my favourite vista of the day and a fitting climax to a perfect hike. That vast mountain view and the rocky crag on which I was standing was reminiscent to me of New Hampshire's White Mountains, the Green Mountains' more spectacular cousins to the east. I must have shot 30 pictures over the course of the day. The final 5 miles were quietly pretty. The trail passed a succession of scenic little ravines and streams. I'd used up my entire cushion and then some on all those wonderful peaks and at Griffith Lake and needed to make up some time at the end. Night was falling like a rock as I cruised the last mile to the Danby-Langrove Road. I made it to the road at 8:03, having wrung every drop of usable twilight from the waning day. 5 minutes later, it was pitch dark. Thursday, the 25th of August, 1983, mile 1641.5. Another 12:15 start on the trail today. Perhaps someday I will see morning on the AT again. That would be pretty cool. I was feeling somewhat run down right from my first step out onto the trail. My energy reserves were low, my head felt fuzzy and my muscles ached as if my body was shaking off some kind of cold or flu bug. Not coincidentally, my hiking really sucked. The footway was of no help at all. It was a veritable rock pile. The Appalachian Trail followed a number of badly eroded woods roads, eastern Pennsylvania revisited. Fortunately, the grades were reasonable. Otherwise, my hike may have gone on till midnight. The first couple of miles followed a congenial little brook up to Little Rock Pond. I've seen so many mountain lakes lately, but this may have been the nicest of all. Nestled in a narrow valley between two good-sized peaks, it radiated an aura of seclusion from the world, an ambience somewhat tarnished by the hordes of campers already thronging its shores at just past 1 o'clock on this fine August afternoon. Someday I would like to return to the long trail in late autumn, after the crowds go home. Leaving the pond, the Appalachian Trail crossed a brook and made a long, gradual climb up White Rocks Mountain. It skirted the summit and began an even longer and more gradual descent. Along the trail down, I very carefully kept an eye open for the spur trail to White Rocks Cliffs. It took me forever to cover that short stretch of trail. I was being very cautious about not overlooking the trail junction. Nevertheless, I somehow missed that side trail, and insufficient time remained to double back and resume my search. The guidebook seemed to indicate that these cliffs were the major highlight of today's entire section of trail. I know that my head was not entirely clear today, but the access trail could not have been obvious, or I would have seen it. I passed Greenwall Shelter shortly afterward. It was still early in the afternoon, but there was no room left at this inn either. All the shelters in Vermont have been crowded. this is a bad time of year to hike the long trail. A lot of summer weekend campers are out on the trail. There are still a number of northbound Appalachian Trail thru-hikers passing through, and the bulk of the southbounders are in this area due to their later starts. Additionally, lots of hikers backpack the long trail each summer. Although I have not been running into many hikers on the trail itself, they've all been turning up at the shelters. After the shelter, the Appalachian Trail passed through private lands for the final 7 miles of the day. It remained, for the most part, in the woods, but crossed a few open pastures. Several stretches were on dirt roads passable by car, including the segment that went past the last shelter on the trail today. Not surprisingly for a shelter located on a road, the place was a dive. Someone remarked in the register that they had discovered the nearby spring to be filled with fragments of scrambled eggs. Shelters accessible by vehicles always seem to attract the truly classy people. For instance, those who see nothing wrong with washing their dishes in the next person's drinking water. An old trail axiom states that the further away from roads one travels when backpacking, the nicer and more considerate the people one encounters. A couple of good views helped ease the last 2 miles of trail. The first overlooked an enormous mountain lake ringed with vacation homes, and the second provided a view of the Rutland, Vermont airport. 2 runways, a long one and a short one, and a few small buildings served the air travel needs of this metropolis. From the second viewpoint, the Appalachian Trail plunged down into Clarendon Gorge, the main highlight of today's trail. The Mill River roared through a narrow defile between 2 sets of cliffs bristling with evergreens. The Appalachian Trail leapt high over the gorge on a long, narrow suspension footbridge. The side ropes rose only slightly higher than my knees. Yee-haw! The experience of crossing that spectacular gorge on that writhing, bucking hunk of wooden rope with virtually no protection against the certainty of a fatal fall was intoxicating. Hiking the AT is not for the faint of heart. I arrived at Vermont Highway 103 at 7:10, almost a full half hour later than expected despite the trail's moderate grades and lack of long climbs. I had needed almost 7 hours to cover 14 miles, carrying an extremely lightweight backpack. As it was, I was lucky to make it that early. Hiking was hard work for me today. I hope to feel better tomorrow. The heat and humidity are supposed to return in strength, and I will be climbing the 2 highest mountains on the Appalachian Trail in Vermont. Rain is predicted for tomorrow night. I should really get an early start, but I'm not going to kid myself. I know me too well by now. Friday the 26th of August 1983, mile 1658.2. I hit the trail at 12:07. Narrowly missing my second morning start on the Appalachian Trail since I began day hiking. At the beginning, the trail followed an old rutted dirt road for a mile to Clarendon Shelter. The place was trashed and vandalised, another shelter located too close to a road. Just past the shelter, the AT left the road. This was the long trail about which I had been hearing stories for years, an ungraded, unimproved footway in the true tradition of New England trails. The half-mile climb up Beacon Hill was steep, eroded and paved with a tangle of exposed tree roots and rocks. Of course, the weather was the worst I have seen for hiking since Massachusetts. The thermometer had skyrocketed and the humidity was amazing. Although these were extremely unusual conditions for northern New England this late in the season, nothing about the weather on this journey can surprise me anymore. The views from the summit of Beacon Hill looked promising, but the haze was so thick that the surrounding mountains and valleys may have fallen off the edge of the earth for all I saw of them. I took it philosophically. You cannot expect great conditions for every great viewpoint you encounter on a 5-month hike. I've had my share. The only potential major disappointments for me would be not getting a decent day to climb Katahdin or a nice afternoon on the eve of my ascent. I would dearly love to live the vision that carried me through the early disasters of this adventure and the long hot summer which followed. I want to stand in that campground in Baxter State Park and gaze up at the fading alpenglow tinting Katahdin's summit, knowing that my quest has succeeded, and I will climb that mountain the next day. If there's any justice in the world, I will receive adequate weather conditions for these 2 events. A battered, disillusioned guy I used to know worked awfully hard for those prospective moments in the sun. The Appalachian Trail descended very slightly from the summit before crossing 2 pastures on either side of a paved road. The first one was an adventure for a city boy like me. It was teeming with cows, large bodies sprawled all around the trail route. I hope there were no bulls in the crowd. Some of these farmers have a warped sense of humour. I sang to them as I passed, regretting the absence of suitable cow songs in the annals of rock music. Just before I reached the fence at the end of the pasture, a large cow leapt to her feet right next to me, no doubt to ask my autograph. I said, "Nice kitty," or something equally intelligent, and she very kindly refrained from mashing me into a formless hulk of blood, flesh and aluminum. I hopped the fence, crossed the road and continued through the second pasture. This one was empty. The only potentially hazardous obstacles were cow pies. A steep climb up to a high saddle between two peaks and a gradual descent along another rough footway brought me to a short dirt roadwalk which ended at the paved Cold River Road. The Appalachian Trail turned right on that road, but I turned left, following the road for about 5 minutes to a little general store. I bought 2 Cokes and chugged them down. The resulting caffeine and sugar rush gave a nice boost for the resumption of my hike. I needed something. My energy level today was no better than yesterday's. With all that heat and humidity, I'd used up well over 2 hours to cover less than 4 miles of rough and rocky trail. The long climb up Mount Killington was still before me, and it was beginning to appear I would be dropping into Sherburne Pass sometime around midnight. I began to come around shortly after my Coke fix. I made up some of the time lost earlier, but kept encountering patches of bad trail on which it was a constant struggle to keep from losing more ground. I managed to maintain the pace on the bad parts while continuing to make up time on the better stretches. I have no idea from where all the good hiking suddenly came. I still felt crummy physically, but I ground out fast miles during the remainder of the day. There were no exceedingly steep stretches on the long ascent of the Coolidge Range, which is the portion of the Green Mountains in which Killington, Pico and the intervening high peaks are located. I ascended at a good clip. After a couple of miles, the Appalachian Trail followed for about a mile a dirt logging road which climbed past the Governor Clement shelter. The place was already crammed with campers who obviously arrived in the 2 four-wheel drive pickup trucks parked out in front. I've seen this type of abuse of the shelter system all through Vermont, particularly in those shelters located on or near roads. It's a tough state for an actual backpacker to find a spot in a shelter during the summer months. The haze remained dense, and clouds were slowly but steadily on the increase all day. As I began the final ascent of Mount Killington, I had already accepted the fact that dazzling panoramas were not in the cards this afternoon. The Appalachian Trail doesn't actually traverse Killington's summit. The final quarter mile is on a steep, rocky side trail. Arriving at the trail junction, I was already in the clouds and still running very late despite all the lost time. I'd recovered during the climb. Even so, I could not see getting that close to the first 4,000-foot summit since central Virginia and not going up. The side trail was one of the steeper trails I've encountered. All traces of soil had eroded away and the footway had become a rock pile. Portions of the climb traverse short stretches of almost smooth rock face, but it was not terribly difficult without my backpack, which I dropped off at the trail junction. Someday I will stand on that summit on a clear day with unlimited visibility. Today I could barely make out the closest peaks. All the same, I always relished the sensation of standing atop an alpine summit. I stood among the ski development along the crest and watched clouds stream past, over, around and beneath me. I revelled in blasts of potent wind and became slightly chilled. That felt wonderful after the steam bath through which I had hiked today. Once I'd carefully made my way back down to the Appalachian Trail, I put my head down and flew over the rest of the range. Killington, Pico and the 3 peaks in between are all owned by a large ski corporation which has developed each of the summits. I could discern the outline of a ski lift through the spruce trees as I passed Snowden Peak. A side trail led from the AT up to Ram's Head, but I passed on it. Had I the time, or even had I not, and the sky were clear, I would have gone for it. As it was, darkness was falling around me like a blanket, and I had used up a half hour which I really could not spare on that side trip to Killington. I passed Pico Camp, a closed wooden cabin available as a shelter for backpackers at 7:20. It possessed a clear, cold-piped spring and an inspiring view of the swirling clouds below. After that, it was all downhill to Sherburne Pass. I made great speed, but night was sprinting onward even faster. I needed my flashlight for the last 5 minutes to the road. I reached US 4 at the top of the pass at 8:08. Incredibly, I was less than 10 minutes late. I did some serious hauling over the final 5 or 6 miles to make it there by dark. Almost. Tomorrow the Appalachian Trail follows the long trail north for just a half mile before turning eastward and departing the Green Mountains. I would like to hike the entire long trail someday. It would be a scenic, leisurely trip of less than a month. In my immediate future are the rolling hill country of eastern Vermont, the Connecticut River Valley and the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Floating in a dreamlike mist beyond is the still intangible object of my yearnings. 480.3 miles to go.